Hi guys, it's Max here from Maximum MMA. Welcome to my first ever video, which will be the first part of a 3-part series breaking down the main event of UFC London, Movsar Evloev vs Lerone Murphy. I am English, so I'll try to avoid any bias. That being said, I think Murphy does him like Aaron Pico. Whoa, who said that? Anyways, in this video, I'll be breaking down Movsar Evloev's last 4 fights, what he does and doesn't do well, and what he might have to implement here in this fight against Lerone Murphy. I'm going to start off by talking about Movsar Evloev's fight versus Dan Ige. Very early on in this fight, he struggles with Dan Ige's heavy boxing. However, he does use his very underrated kicking game, which he uses to keep himself safe. Once Dan Ige starts landing a few nice shots to the body, Movsar Evloev shoots a huge flying knee up the middle, hurting Dan Ige really badly and slitting him wide open. From then on, round 1 is all Movsar. Ige's jab does land quite consistently, but all real damage is done on Movsar's side. He also lands a couple nice takedowns in this round. There were also a couple times that I noticed Movsar Evloev would overextend on his right hand, which could leave him to get countered against a guy like Lerone Murphy. Throughout round 2, Movsar showcases his underrated boxing, piecing up Dan Ige for the majority of the round. Ige struggles to land to Movsar's head, but the body is wide open. As soon as Dan starts finding success in the body, Movsar throws another beautiful flying knee. It doesn't land flush, but it definitely deterred Dan Ige from any more body work. Late round 2, he takes down Dan Ige and cuts him open with a nasty ground and pound elbow. In round 3, Movsar was constantly chain wrestling, pushing the pace and landing some ground and pound. Dan Ige just had no answer for him. Movsar was stronger, he was faster, he was more athletic, and he was the much more complete fighter. Movsar looked very dominant in this fight, and Dan Ige didn't have very much for him. The Diego Lopez fight was a very different story. Round 1 starts off really chaotically. Movsar is really aggressive on the feet, but he gets overzealous. Diego landed a nasty right hook in close and rocked Movsar bad. While retreating, Movsar catched a calf kick from Diego and turned it into an ankle pick. But then as soon as they're on the ground, Diego starts attacking a leg lock. So much happened not even 1 minute into the fight. Movsar reversed position and controlled Diego for a bit. At one point he pushes up for some ground and pound and Diego attacks a really nice armbar. This was actually really close, but Movsar again escaped and regained top position. The rest of the round was pretty uneventful, with Movsar landing some pitter-patter ground and pound strikes, and Diego locking in a triangle choke in the closing seconds of the round. Round 2 started off with some nice boxing on the feet. At one point, Movsar enters with his hands down, and Diego lands a nice check left hook. This was one of the few strikes that Diego managed to land throughout this round. However, Movsar was then picking Diego apart with straight shots and controlling Diego for the majority of this round. Diego began to slow down quite badly. In the last minute of round 2, Movsar lands some nasty ground and pound from the stacked guard. This has been a common theme for Diego throughout his UFC career. He is way too comfortable to sit on his back and throw up submission attempts, and Movsar Evloev really punished him for it. Round 3 was pretty similar to round 2. Movsar controlled the stand-up with his boxing and controls top position on the ground. Diego drops for a few submission attempts, but Movsar stays composed and he escapes. In this fight, Movsar showcased his cardio, his boxing, and his really elite submission defense. Movsar vs Arnold Allen starts off very slowly. Neither man landed much on the feet in the first round as Movsar struggled to get around Arnold Allen's jab, and as Arnold was being really cautious of the takedown attempts. Allen did do a really good job of defending the first couple of shots. However, Movsar stole the round in the last minute by landing a few nice takedowns and controlling Allen. Round 2 was also pretty uneventful. Neither man landed much on each side until Movsar hurt Allen really badly with a nice left hand, cutting him wide open. Evloev then landed a few nice significant strikes to end that round. In round 3, Allen realised he needed the finish. He got in Movsar's face, he boxed volume and he just made Movsar really uncomfortable. At one point, he gets Movsar into a front headlock position and lands some knees, which unfortunately at the time were illegal as Movsar's hand was on the floor. This was very controversial, as from some angles we can see they were illegal, and many people argue that Allen was robbed of the finish. Allen then controlled the majority of the stand-up, stuffing all the takedowns and trying to chase the finish he needed. He also locked in one of his signature ninja chokes, and this got in very tight, but Movsar escaped and reversed position. The final minute of the fight is Evloev with his hands around Arnold's waist, unable to take him down. In this fight, Evloev showed he can be an elite anti-grappler who has high level takedown defense. This was a really good win for Evloev despite the controversy surrounding the fact that Arnold was arguably robbed of his finish. The Aljamain Sterling fight was definitely the most entertaining fight of Movsar's UFC career. Aljo landed a few nice right hands before taking him down early. I'm pretty sure he was the first person to actually take down Movsar in his UFC career. He also controlled Movsar from the back and landed a nasty slam. Movsar then reverses position and controls Aljo for the majority of the rest of the round. Round 2 starts with another nice takedown from Aljo, but Movsar is just clearly much stronger and reverses him relatively quickly. Movsar then controlled Aljo's back and landed some ground and pound shots. They scramble up to the feet and they exchange for a bit. Movsar landed the cleaner shots before then taking Aljo down off of a kick. Evloev then wins the majority of the scrambles due to his physicality advantage over Aljo. Aljo controls the majority of the third round with his wrestling, but I believe Movsar stole the round in the closing minutes as Aljo began to tire out. Here, Movsar showed his high-level scrambling and composure against the former champ. He did show, however, that he does struggle slightly when against a high-level grappler who will offensively wrestle against him. However, this also could be due to the fact that Aljo was over the age of 17, and Movsar just prefers grappling with them younger ones. If you don't get that joke, search up Movsar Evloev 17-year-old wife. Overall, this was a very solid performance from Movsar Evloev in a very good competitive fight. Now obviously, some of the skills I've said Movsar does well won't be relevant against a guy like Lerone Murphy. Lerone won't be out there offensively wrestling against a guy like Evloev, and he won't aggressively hunt for submissions off of his back like Diego did. He does, however, threaten a guillotine to deter the takedown attempt. This works really well, for example, for my GOAT Dan Hooker against Spamrot, but I don't think this will work very well against a guy like Evloev, who has shown elite submission defense. He probably just won't care, he'll just ignore that it's there and shoot the takedown anyway. One thing I think will work very well for Evloev in this fight is taking Lerone down off of kicks. Lerone is a high-level kickboxer, and Murphy has shown he can take people down off of kicks, like Aljamain Sterling and like Diego Lopez. I also think Movsar needs to push the wrestling pace, as even if it doesn't work and Murphy does stuff all his shots, Lerone will open up on the feet, his hands will begin to drop, and that's when Movsar Evloev can start using his underrated striking. One thing Movsar needs to be really careful of though, is the countering game of Lerone Murphy. Movsar does sometimes enter the pocket with his hands down, and the only person to really punish him for this in the past was Diego Lopez. Lerone Murphy is definitely someone who can counter these defensive mistakes. Overall, I do think Movsar is absolutely an elite fighter that belongs at the top of this division, and he can pose some issues for Lerone Murphy. Later this week, I'll be releasing my breakdown of Lerone Murphy and another video breaking down my final pick. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.